Happy politics, and welcome to a slightly belated edition of this week's BC Poly Hot Stove. It's only slightly belated by a couple of hours, but I know you're waiting anxiously, and so wait no longer. My name is McLean Kay. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Orca, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by
Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. It is all my fault. I was trapped in a meeting with wonderful people, but I could not escape to come do my BC Poly Hot Stove hit here, so I apologize. But
I refuse to accept that your actual day job gets in the way of your unpaid appearances on this fine website.
Like, what's the point of that? I have no idea. Don't they know that this should really be the sweet gig, and then everything else should be the sidebar? But nonetheless, I'm happy to be here.
Composing an angry email after this.
Excellent. I appreciate that.
Before we begin, we should start by acknowledging a serious situation in the legislature and one of the new MLAs, Grace Lohr, who is actually my MLA here in Victoria, Beacon Hill. She announced that she's stepping back from her duties because her 4-year-old son has been diagnosed with a brain tumor, and we have nothing to add to this other than to say that our thoughts are with her and her family, and we are pulling for Grace, her family, and especially the little one.
Yeah, I mean, McLean, you and I are both fathers. I can't imagine what that family's going through, and her little boy Asher. It doesn't matter what team you're on in politics when stuff like this comes up. This is a horrible thing, and just pulling for Asher, hoping for that family. And Grace, don't be watching this. Don't waste your time with us. But if you were, know that wherever people stand on the political spectrum in BC, that we're pulling for you and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes across from this show, every other show, and for, as you say, people of all political stripes. Everyone's pulling for the Grace Lohr household.
Yes.
On to the news of the week. Wow, there is so much we can talk about. Do we want to start with the $645,000 toilets that's causing a stir in Victoria, or excuse me, in Vancouver? I mean, it's hard to even keep a straight face talking about a toilet that costs more than my condo. And, I don't know how many of my cars I could have bought for that. I don't want to do the math. It's depressing. Here's the thing. It's a toilet being set up for the right reasons. It's, more accessibility for public toilets. This is an admirable thing. The problem is, the toilet kind of comes with a set cost. The toilet costs, I think it's $150,000. And even worse for Vancouver, other cities in BC have recently installed the exact same toilet. As recently as 2 years ago in Esquimalt, it cost a whopping $300,000, which is, a lot. But it's half what they're spending in Vancouver. People have noticed, and they're not happy. What's going on there, Jordan?
Well, a few things get me excited as an old tax fighter than government waste. The old Canadian Taxpayers Federation rep in me, yeah, you like that, would have just been I would have been all over this. I would have had media event there, charging people, trying to recoup $645,000. You could have had a lot of fun with this. Two thoughts come out. Number one, I was shocked that this seemed to be pushed by the provincial politicians, which I was kind of confused by at first, because I'm like, this is clearly a City of Vancouver / Parks Board issue, and you can bet it'll be the top line item on Unspun this week. Once underscoring Jody Vance get done with it. But
George is rubbing his hands with glee.
My goodness. But it turns out it's a provincially funded program. The federal government gave the province dollars, and the province allocated to this $645,000, twice what it costs in other communities. Something hinky went on there. There was some jiggery pokery going on. I'm assuming. McLean, the thing that politicians sometimes forget, or bureaucrats sometimes forget, is that none of these dollars materialize from nowhere, right? Okay, yeah, some money comes in through royalties or casinos or whatever, but the vast majority is through taxes. And somewhere there is a person who worked 2 jobs to try to put, during a pandemic, to try to put people into a better life, and they pay the taxes, maybe not even begrudgingly, maybe willingly, in order to contribute to society, to healthcare, to education, to all those things that you want to think that your taxes are going for. This is a noble, sacred trust between taxpayer and government. And then the government breaks that sacred trust by spending twice as much on public toilets that a very small percentage of British Columbians will ever see, let alone use. Kudos to it seemed to be driven by the BC Liberal Caucus. They seem to found this and pushed it out. I must pushed it out. Boy, there's a lot of problems with this. Anyways,
that wasn't even intentional, I can tell.
We're tired of feeling like number two. We're tired of having the bureaucrats number one all over us, et cetera, et cetera. Write your favorite
Time to wipe the slate clean. Yeah, you can go on and on and on. We're going to, and speaking of thrones, we're going to have to strap you to your chair with your microphones giving you some static every time you move. But these are the things that happen on live to tape TV. And you're right. I mean, it got brought up in question period in that today because it's an easy thing for people to relate to. I mentioned off the top that this beautiful condo that you're looking at costs significantly less than that toilet. It's an easy thing for people to conjure in their head. We often talk about, why don't people get more excited about, deficits that run into the millions and hundred millions and billions of dollars soon. And a $645,000 toilet, that's easy to relate to.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, people instinctively know how much something should cost like that. And those are the scandals that always come back to really stick. So think of Bevoda and the $16 orange juice. Like $16 in the scope of the federal government spending is nothing, obviously. It's less than nothing. It'd be like you and I spending a penny, if they exist anymore. Nothing. But, it became a thing because everyone knows how much you spend on orange juice and it's not $16. And this is a similar thing, right? Like, you think of your, that's 2/3 of a house in East Vancouver, that, which is not cheap. It's a condo. It's you start to do it and you start to add it up and you're like, something is wrong here. It doesn't compute and we need answers. So it'll be interesting to see if I'm the NDP, I'm sure, which I didn't watch question period this morning, but I'm sure all they did was punt it to the city. Oh, city decision, infrastructure is important. The problem with this is there's opportunity costs, right? Like, $645,000. If you could do it for $300,000 or $320,000, you could have built 2 of these and helped twice as many people. Maybe you don't think public toilets are that big a priority. You could have taken that $645,000 and applied it to an affordable housing unit or any other kind of program. So you lose the chance to do something better with that money. It's just, man, Vancouver City Hall. We don't talk about it a lot here because Unspun does such a great job of pulling their hair out over it.
That's right. We don't want to be guilty of gimmick infringement. But in this case, sorry, we taped earlier in the week.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Vancouver City Hall is just, what a zoo. Like, what a mess. And, there are 2 councils who, I'm actively rooting to see cleaned out next fall. And it's yours in Victoria. And it's Vancouver's. Like, those are dysfunctional, broken places, wasting taxpayer money, not, I don't think, reflective of taxpayer priorities, and major changes need to happen at both.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into this, but moments before we started taping, I saw an exchange here in Victoria. They were referring to Rob Fleming, noted reactionary right-wing firebrand Rob Fleming as reactionary because he did an interview on CBC talking about Beacon Hill Park and some of the crime that's coming around the area, and it's reactionary to even bring this up. And so I would suggest that if you're accusing Rob Fleming of being reactionary, then you have lost the plot.
Yes,
he has many things, but that is not one of them.
Yes, Rob Fleming, not exactly noted for his speedy and knee-jerk responses to things. Ask the teachers during his reign as education minister. But, we are seeing the devolution of relationship between the NDP government and municipalities. The same municipalities who famously cheered John Horgan and his crew when they came in after 16 years of tyrannical rule by the BC Liberals, cheered them at the UBCM, oh, breath of fresh air, we're going to get all this stuff done. And now you're seeing relationships fall apart in Victoria, which is fine. I'm fully on the NDP side in that relationship as far as I can. But in Vancouver, in Penticton, all over the place, you had David Eby is in a very high-profile spat with Penticton Council, in which he made the kind of shocking claim that, well, he's talked to Penticton Council more than any other council in the province except for Vancouver and Victoria. He's talked to them twice, which does tell you exactly how little interaction the cabinet is having with the mayors during this terrible time. Maple Ridge, that was another example of where things, and I look at Penticton, I don't think it's wrong to want wraparound supports if you're plunking a homeless shelter in the middle of a community.
Especially when they were promised and they're just not delivered.
Totally. So David Eby breaks his promise to this community and then is stunned and appalled that they would be like, okay, well, we're going to hold you to the end date of the contract you had for this, and they're out. That's how it works. Like, if one side doesn't live up to their side of the agreement, why should the other side live up to it? Like, I just don't understand that, and then the heavy hand of actually coming in and, doing something that I don't recall the BC Liberals doing, except for when they fired the Vancouver School Board. Again, a very wise decision that most people supported. It's such a weird mess, this municipal provincial relationships are troublesome at best of times. Right now, though, we're headed into like a really rocky road between those two.
I started with an unplanned diversion talking about some tweets and that I saw before we taped, but it is kind of a nice bridge to the next thing I wanted to talk about. There was an interaction last week on Twitter with Andrew Weaver, the former leader of the BC Green Party and a climate scientist, among other things.
I hadn't heard that. I hadn't heard he was a climate scientist.
You never heard that. Yeah, that's true. He never brings that up. But anyway, he did the one thing you can't do on Twitter. Do you know what that is?
Oh, argue with bike people.
Yes, and there's a way to argue with bike people that you actually get an easier ride, no pun intended, if you tell them they're bad and wrong and you want to pave the world and just drive everywhere. That they understand. But what Andrew did was something much worse. He objected to one particular bike lane, which he said he drives by every day, and he thinks that it could have been put on a different street. I mean,
what a monster!
Right? And then and from there, oh my God, because I was tweeted with him, I was included most of these mentions, and there was dozens more that I wasn't included on. And oh my God, whatever you think of Andrew Weaver, I don't think he deserved a lot of the scorn that was thrown his way. He was accused of suffering from a brain tumor, of having dementia, of being a Tory with a Tesla, which I think he probably took the most objection to. And it was quite funny. I mean, there would be people saying, well, name one bike lane you do approve of. And it's like, well, I like this one, and this one on Harbor Street is fantastic, and I really like this one, and I use this one all the time. I just don't like this one because I think it should have been on this street. Still, no.
Yep. Galloping Goose. Did he say Galloping Goose?
I don't know if he mentioned Galloping Goose. That's a separate, but yes.
Okay, so I did not have on my bingo card Andrew Weaver, former leader of the Greens, versus the bike lobby in Victoria. So that was a surprise for me in 2021. So I'm grateful to Doc Weaver for that, because it's not often I get surprised on Twitter anymore, and I didn't have that. I felt like Doc Weaver was channeling his inner Jody Vance. Where she constantly gets the snot kicked out of her, in frankly very rude and often chauvinistic ways by the bike lobby group, who for some reason thinks it's their God-given right to shit all over anyone who disagrees with them. Sorry, kids. There goes our clean billing. I'll be honest with you. 6 years ago, I muted a ton of those cyclists during the big TransLink tax debate, and you never regret it. I've never spent a day thinking to myself, boy, I wonder what the bike lobby is up to in Vancouver or in Victoria. Here's the shocking thing. A lot of these groups are funded by municipal grants, provincial dollars. So it's actually your tax dollars at work kicking the crap out of Dr. Weaver for having an opinion as to where a bike lane should or should not go. I don't know. It amazes me that they think this works. But maybe it does. I don't know. Like, maybe this kind of...
Maybe it does. I mean, in an era when, being the loudest on social media is often how you get what you want. It's Andrew Weaver's point was, and not to speak for him, but I mean, I was included in a lot of these mentions, was that he thinks that this kind of dogma and dogpiling on people who, again, aren't objecting to bike lanes in general, but think that this particular one would have been better on this other street, that this actually hinders the movement because you talk about Jody Vance. Jody's not an anti-cycling fanatic. She just doesn't like one particular one. And, to treat people who don't think that every single bike lane is that every road should be removed and just be replaced with bike lanes, to treat those people as, pond scum and accuse them of terrible things. Because you're right, Jody takes a lot of abuse on Twitter. Boy, it turns me off. I'm not anti-bike lane, but man, I'm anti-bike lane Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, Jody has, what does she always say, 4 bikes? It's like 43 communications workers. Yeah. Clink. Jody has 4 bikes. Clink.
Clink.
And I stand with Vance on this one. Let me tell you, she's not wrong on this Stanley Park one. Constricting access to the park for people with disabilities and seniors, and people coming from out of town. I don't understand it. I don't understand the bike lobby's tactics. I didn't understand it when they used to do critical mass, where they would shut down downtown Vancouver on the last Friday of a month.
Yeah.
They're obnoxious. They're often rude, and I think they put in a bad light the many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cyclists who enjoy riding, just want a quiet place to do it, and don't want to have to get into scraps online in order to have that right.
Yeah, and who may agree with every road is a bike lane that's been wasted. They may even agree with that, but they don't feel the need to throw things at people who are just trying to get their kids to school in the car, which is, I don't know, it's frustrating.
Yeah, Dr. Weaver, Doc Weaver, and I feel like we talk about him a lot. It's because he's such a fascinating cat, right? The climate scientist. Then he was kind of a pragmatic. He was sort of a Tory with a Tesla in some of his fiscal policy, and then he falls in love with the bromance with John Horgan, and didn't really want to side with Horgan, I don't think, at the beginning, and then fully embraced it after. I'm sure Doc Weaver's working on a book. I, for one, will be buying it because if it helps me figure him out a bit, I will enjoy that.
BC politics misses him a little bit. He was never boring. It was a roller coaster in question period, and especially in press conferences. He was fun to interview. Mm-hmm. The other issue, before we get into our what is rapidly becoming my favorite weekly feature on the Hot Stove, and I think part of the reason that our audience keeps coming in, which is why we save it for the end. Very clever. The issue of childcare. Childcare was a big central issue and promise, quite frankly, made in the 2017 campaign. It was the NDP promised, was it 24,000 new spaces, and also that it would be that $10 a day daycare is coming. It's been almost 4 years. That hasn't happened. I think I want to say 4,000 have been created. I don't have my sheet in front of me. It's an issue that's not really going away. It's the NDP now, 2 elections in, are in that spot where I think that 16 years of neglect and all that is now much less effective, in that they are now officially a 2-term government, and their own things they promised 4 years ago, it's reasonable to ask them how that's going.
I agree. First of all, if you blame them for 16 years of neglect, I would point out in 2013, Adrian Dix absolutely kiboshed the idea of $10 a day daycare, said it was too expensive. It's
true.
And, stripped it out of their platform during his ill-fated run in 2013. So you don't get to complain about those 4 years, NDPers. And the other 12, okay, make your case. Those 4 years, that's not part of your plan. Katrina Chen, Minister of State for Childcare. So she was in question period yesterday. I think Todd Stone asked a question like, where $10 a day has been problem. Like, where are we at with this? You failed miserably. Incompetent gets thrown around a lot. I'm not sure it did in this case, mm-hmm. but that was the general feeling on it. And she cited that 36,000 families have better childcare today than before. Well, if you actually look at the numbers, it's unclear how many of those are actually $10 a day daycare. I have no idea how she got to 36,000. I'm sure she has some sort of talking point that kind of lays it all out. But I would say this, even if you buy into the fact it's 36,000, there's 250,000 children under the age of 5 in British Columbia. So that's still a big gap. And if it's actually closer to the 4,000 or 5,000 that it seems to be, the documents you've seen, then that's an even more shocking gap. But what I want to say here is look, the BC Liberal Party, I think, has evolved in their thinking on this issue. And I, for one, am here for it. During those 16 years, you're right, you didn't hear them talk about $10 a day childcare. But now in this era of, first of all, Christy Clark running in 2017, I believe it was in the clone speech, $10 a day daycare was one of the things she offered. And then in the 2020 platform of Andrew Wilkinson, I believe there was a commitment to some sort of reduced costs in childcare and certainly more spaces. They've come a long way in their thinking, and mm-hmm. So have I. I don't love big government programs. I don't, I'm not itching for that by any stretch of imagination, but we're in a recession. that has disproportionately affected lower income folks and women. And there's no way around it. The stats show it. Women have taken the brunt of this COVID recession, and certainly lower income people as well. So we need to do whatever we can to reactivate that part of the workforce. And childcare is a huge part of that. And rightly or wrongly, there's still this systemic expectation that women take care of the kids, or they're the ones who are responsible, which is changed for many people, but not for everyone. We have to find ways to free that up and to change that. And childcare offerings are part of that. Now, would I like to see it incent the private sector to create spaces? Yes. I'd rather see it strongly regulated, but free market on this, of course. But the NDP, made a promise. They have not fulfilled it. They're not close to fulfilling it. And kudos to the BC Liberals for holding them to account on it, even if they have to deal with the eye rolling, 16 years you did nothing, and the tutting of certain press gallery folks, how dare they talk about an issue that they didn't deal with for 16 years. Well, they didn't promise it, but part of the job of the opposition is to hold the government account for the promises they made, whether you agree with them or not.
I couldn't agree more. We often make fun of, not make fun of, but we often bring up our two sort of different perspectives. You're a conservative. I used to work for the federal Liberals, but one of the areas in where I think that intervention in the economy is good and warranted is childcare, because I think it's one of the single biggest things you can do to free up half the workforce. And as we've seen, the pandemic cast some very harsh light on that. And so, I agree that the BC Liberal Party has evolved in its thinking, and that's a good thing. That the NDP is going to have to face up to the fact that promised 24,000 faces, people are going to notice when it doesn't materialize. It's not a comment on the NDP. Any government promise that is, what are they at? Is that a quarter? Not even a quarter. A fifth? 4 years in? Yeah, it's going to get brought up. It's going to get noticed, and that's just the name of the game.
And Angus Reid's exit polling for the last election showed that NDP won female voters by something like 25 points. And they won young men by about 15. Mm-hmm. And those are, obviously women and young men are the ones who are most acutely aware of childcare promises. And when, generation after generation of these kids are growing up with none of the promises that the NDP have made coming true, that will end up stacking up. And I'm sure it will be an issue in 2024 or whenever John Horgan selfishly calls the next election.
Well, this one I think we're pretty safe is going to be 4 years from now, but we should see.
I don't bet on it. I wouldn't bet on it, McLean. Why would it be safe?
Really? Well, because he's got a majority at this point. I mean, when you've got a minority and you think you can roll the dice and get a majority, if things go very badly for the BC Liberals and whoever the next leader is an unmitigated disaster, and the Greens, can't get stuck out of southern Vancouver Island, then maybe there could be some temptation to go a little early, but only if it looks like whoever the BC Liberal leader is might actually gain momentum and get better with time. It's hard to say based on who. Yeah. We don't know who the next leader of the opposition is going to be, so we're all guessing. But
I wouldn't give him the benefit of the doubt.
They're more likely to go the full term this time.
No, I wouldn't give him the benefit of that doubt, because here's the thing: he breaks these rules all the time. He broke it to call the election. He broke CASA, which he signed his name to, and every member of his caucus signed their name to. Broke that. He's broken the budget day. He's broken throne speech day. He doesn't care about parliamentary calendars. What in John Horgan's reign as premier would make you think he gives a damn about parliamentary calendars? He doesn't. He will go whenever the moment strikes him that is best for him. And if that's 2.5 years from now, he'll go 2.5 years from now. If it's 5 years from now, or 4.5 years from now, he'll go 4.5 years from now. He won't be bound by Gordon Campbell's pesky laws. There's nothing in his history that shows he would be. Yeah. So I think, what was Dr. Phil say? When they show you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
He's shown us who he is. I believe him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not even arguing that point. I'm just saying I don't think he'll see it to being in his advantage until 4 years from now. He's got, he's got 4 years to do whatever the hell he wants. He's going to use them.
What's better than 4 years? What's better than 4 years? 7 years. What's better than 4 years is 7 years, or 6.5 years.
That's true. No, you're right. Okay, yeah, these are good points.
Thank you.
And speaking of whoever the next BC Liberal leader,
you hear that, Hot Stove listeners? Good points right here.
Let's go. He's it's all going down the tubes here because we're going to keep going with that. So, those of you who are keenly watching BC politics, and if you're watching the show, that's most of you. This is the part of the show where I learn the most, to be quite honest, because I don't think there's anyone in the province who can claim to be more plugged into what's going on with the BC Liberal Party and the still sort of quietly bubbling in the background leadership race than our very own Jordan Bateman. Jordan, where are we at?
Well, where are we at? I believe we have a field of 7 candidates now. I believe we have firmed up with the asterisk of Tom Shapitka. I'm not sure where Tom is. Mike Morris has dropped out now. Mike Bernier seems to have pulled back, although he hasn't said anything officially. But the 7 being Kevin Falcon, Ellis Ross, Michael Lee. I almost said Anders Lee because of the New York Islander winger who just put on long-term injured reserve and ruined my fantasy team. Michael Lee, Aaron Gunn, Renee Merrifield, Gavin Dew, and Val Litwin. I believe Litwin is in. I've heard that he has signed a campaign manager, familiar to many BC Liberals, a fantastic person named Evan Southern. Hopefully I'm not outing anything there. But, I've heard it from multiple sources now, so I believe it to be true, although I haven't talked to Evan directly. But that's a good get for Val, and certainly, when you talk about candidacies, Val being the newest one, former BC Chamber of Commerce president, left about a year ago, certainly has his finger on the pulse of small business. And I would say maybe the candidate with both the lowest floor and the high ceiling in this race. Yeah. I can close my eyes and I can picture a way he wins it. I can close my eyes and picture a way he, gets Bob Wenmund and 18 votes and off he goes right into the
Wenmund. That's a deep
Langley.
Deep cut there.
It's not for us Langley people.
So why don't we do this? You've laid out the 7 contenders as we believe them to be. I'll go through them one at a time, and then you give me the 1-sentence sales pitch for each one, the elevator pitch each one of them, to prospective voters, and then we can talk about how each one could, if that's the strategy, what they should do to win. And we'll start with.
It's like I'm Corey Hogan on the. It's like I'm Corey Hogan on The Strategist now. I get to do this.
Right. This will be fun. Yeah. Okay. So we'll start with the person that everyone says is the presumptive favorite, Kevin Falcon. What's the pitch?
Look, we got to go back to when the greatest years of BC Liberal history were. I'm the person who was there and saw Gordon Campbell rebuild this party. I can unite the social conservatives, the fiscal conservatives, and the Liberals, and I understand most importantly how to rebuild the economy, because really that's what it comes down to, is we have got to get out of this recession. I'm the man to do it.
Okay, and then we'll do, rather than doing the sales pitch for each one, now we'll say for Kevin Falcon, what should they do? What tactics should he pursue? What strategy should he follow to capitalize on that as his sales pitch? And again, we're talking to BC Liberal members because it's a leadership race, and not necessarily the general public, although, that could come into play as well. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I've heard from folks working with Kevin, and look, you got to kind of thresh out, what is glowing reviews of the candidates. But I've heard from people I trust within that campaign that Kevin is fully engaged. He's hitting on all cylinders. A lot of the rust they were worried about in November, December has been knocked off. Like, he's got a command of the issues, and they're seeing the old fire back in his eyes, which is a very good sign, because when Kevin Falcon was on his game, he was one of the best politicians in British Columbia. So, the tactics for this the knock against Kevin is that everyone in the field seems to consider him a prohibitive front runner, like a prohibitive favorite to win. And if you were betting, he'd be the one you bet on, even if the odds weren't great, the return wasn't great. The problem with that is, it's been a long time in this kind of system of electing leaders that the front runner has won across all parties. That's how we ended up with Stéphane Dion. That's how we ended up with Andrew Scheer. That's how we ended up with Andrew Wilkinson. That's not a knock on those folks, because you got to climb, you got to get the points, and you do the system the way it is. But when was the last time we saw a front runner actually win one of these races? Christy Clark might have been a co-favorite, but I think most people thought Kevin was going to be here.
I actually think that Falcon was the favorite in that one too. Yeah,
so that for him, he has got to come out and say, okay, I'm the prohibitive front runner, and how do you do that? So I think the strategy for him is, there's 2 schools of thought. One is come out now or wait until August-ish, September-ish. I think if I were him, I'd come out sooner than later. And I would pin every attack and every criticism, not on the other folks running in the race, but on John Horgan. And I'd make it clear I'm running against John Horgan. And what you're seeing right now in April 2021 is a preview of how I'm going to drive the agenda all the way to election day and then defeat this guy and become the next premier of British Columbia. I'm ready on day one. I'm a premier material. And in the meantime, the way to get to that office is to oppose and to really, hold their feet to the fire. And look, Falcon's got credentials.
We lost a lot of that to static there, unfortunately. Your microphone's giving you a hell of a time.
I know. How's that?
That's much better. Okay. Sorry. And I mean, I agree. I think if you're the front runner, and especially as somebody who's not in the caucus room to, reassure the Ellis Rosses and Renee Merrifields of the world, you're not there to smooth over ruffled feathers if you do, not take a shot, but criticize. This is going to happen if they're going to criticize each other's ideas and policies. And so, yeah, that's exactly what I would do if I was perceived as the front runner. And I also agree that going early makes sense because he's already suffering the slings and arrows. David devotes a portion of his weekly podcast to Kevin Falcon. So, I mean, they're already going there. They're treating Kevin Falcon as though he's going to be the candidate in 4 years, or sooner.
Yeah,
as the case may be.
And the great thing for Kevin is he can see every sling or arrow they're going to throw at him and shoot at him, and he can start counter-messaging now. So that actually can be turned to an advantage. And then when he's on the debate stage with the other six, and if one of them starts to give him the gears, well, you're out of touch or you're rusty or whatever, he can turn it back and he can say, Val, I respect your opinion and, I want to hear from everyone within the party, but we need to understand what the actual fight is here. It's not between us. It's between us and John Horgan. It's between us and David Eby. It's between us and Adrian Dix. We have to be the ones to solve this problem. I'm pleased to hear that, not the old Kevin, but that, because he's also been away from politics he left in 2013.
Yeah.
So, no one has marked a ballot for him since 2009, which is a long time. But, he's back. He's seeing it clearly. Sounds like he is, razor sharp. That's a good sign for that campaign for sure.
All right. The one-sentence elevator pitch for Ellis Ross.
Well, the Ellis Ross pitch. Okay. I was the leader of the Haisla Nation, and we had a problem in Northwest BC. We were poor. We were seeing our young people leave the reserve, or leave the community, or even worse, taking their own lives, falling into an abyss of drugs and alcohol, and we were adrift. And you know how we turned that around? Economic prosperity. We signed deals on LNG. We started companies. We trained people. We gave more apprentices than any ever before. And our community now is one of the most prosperous in British Columbia, and it's thanks to that. And that is precisely what I will do as leader of the BC Liberal Party. I will laser focus us on economic prosperity, but not prosperity for prosperity's sake, but prosperity because they can create things like education programs and healthcare and social programs, the things we value and love about British Columbians. I can bring these messages together.
And
I'm going to vote for that. I love that already.
There you go.
Ellis, that was free.
Jordan's just declared. What would you do? What strategy would you follow? And Ellis Ross is still the only, I'll say semi-official. And it's official. He said he's doing it. So he's still he's in many ways the first candidate.
I guess I'm doing it. He guesses he's doing it. Well, I would be getting the story out right away. I would have a video company in my community documenting this. I would be building little 30-second, 90-second, 3-minute, and a 20-minute video of the success stories. I would be getting people like Crystal Smith, I believe, is the current chief counselor of the Haisla Nation. I would be getting her, testimony and endorsement, and I would be building out essentially, look at this, little model here of what we did, and how does that relate now to COVID? In general, taking the principles from that and expanding it across the entire BC economy. And not just being about oil and gas and resources, because that was a big chunk of what happened in the Haisla Nation, but they did a lot more than just that. And, connecting the dots for people. We need major infrastructure projects because they create prosperity, which then, allows us to fund communities.
I agree. The one thing I'll add about Ellis Ross is others have commented on this, including Vaughn Palmer. So if he says it, it counts. No one in the legislature in recent memory commands a presence like Ellis Ross does, and that when he speaks, everyone grinds to a halt. There is zero heckling. people actually pay attention and listen because two reasons. Well, he's a First Nations chief, but also, I mean, he says things that no one else will.
Yeah.
And he has a lot of credibility that literally no one else in that building does. And so it'll be fascinating to see how that works on this stage.
Yeah, exactly. And if he did win, you could just picture John Horry. Like, he's not going to get away with the "come on, man" to like Ellis Ross. Like, you know, I've seen Ellis Ross debate Pam Palmater. Like, he's been up against like very difficult debaters, top-notch debaters, and he's held his own. So don't sleep on Ellis Ross. Like, because he's the first one in, and because, you know, it was like, well, I'm going to do this. I guess I'll do this. I think there's a tendency not to take him seriously. He should be taken very seriously. Yeah. On my bingo card, I have him strongly in second place. And that's not a bad place to be. If you can hold Falcon to 40% of the first vote and you're in second, chances are you're the next leader of the BC Liberal Party.
Michael Lee, what would you do for him? And we'll say, in the interest of full disclosure off the top, that I worked for Michael's last leadership campaign. It was one of my last projects before this wonderful website. So I will let you give the Michael Lee elevator pitch.
Well, you know, we are at risk of becoming a rural-only party. And by God, I love my northern colleagues and rural British Columbians, and they are the very heartlands of this province. They're the economic engine. But we cannot form government unless we reach out to urban voters. And I have one of the only 2 seats in urban British Columbia for the BC Liberals. Clearly, my message, my reputation, my skill set translated in a way to reaching out to urban voters that no one else's did. And a renewal here has to be an urban renewal, has to be a suburban renewal. I'm the man to help guide that renewal.
Yeah, the thing I would add to that is that Michael Lee's campaign, and I've already forgotten which year that was, 2018, signed up more new members than any other campaign. And so obviously, I mean, that was a large part of the reason he finished as well as he did, a very, very, very close third. And so, yeah, there's whether he can continue that momentum, we'll see. I'm going to give you the curveball here, and I think this is the one that a lot of people will be waiting on, because this is probably the most, I don't want to say controversial because that's not fair, but the one that the most people are raising their eyebrows at, and that is, of course, Aaron Gunn.
All right, Aaron Gunn. I think the pitch for Aaron Gunn is this. Since 2001, the BC Liberals have seen their popular vote erode in every election.
This is true.
Clearly what we're doing is no longer resonating with young people and with everyday British Columbians. If it was, we'd be in power, but it's not. We need a different way of doing politics. We need a different way of seeing the world. We need someone who's not tied to 16 years of the past. We need someone who can break free. And we need someone who can bring conservatives back into the fold. And Kevin says he can do that. And, you know, maybe, but, you know, there's some federal Liberals who are uncomfortable with Kevin. I can bring all the factions together because now it's not about seeing the world ideologically. It's about seeing the world generationally. And I can bring a generation into the BC Liberals through social media and other means that hasn't been there before. And I'm not afraid to say the hard things. You know, it's easy. People can, you know, dance around on political issues, blah, blah, blah. But I'm a populist. And why is populism wrong? It's not. Populism is just code for what the people want. And isn't that what representative democracy is all about? I'm Aaron Gunn. I want to be your candidate for BC Liberal leader. I don't know. Something to that effect.
Can he do it? Can he do it? Can Aaron Gunn's team? I mean, we've actually of the strategies. I think his is the one you've talked to it before, and it's finding out whether or not you can translate however many tens of thousands Facebook followers he has into paid memberships that will vote for him.
Look, Aaron is fearless when it comes to interviews. There will be few people who have done as much on camera time as he has. He's not afraid to go into uncomfortable situations. Like, he took the interview with Van Colour. He took the interview with Rebel Media, whether you like that or not. Like, so he doesn't cut out media outlets based on where they're from or what they believe or any of that. He goes in and meets the questions head on and answers them as best he can. So I do think that kind of authenticity will be refreshing for people. Like, there's no slick packaging with Aaron Gunn. Like, you know, which is funny because he's a social media guy, but it's not slick. It's, you know, I know Aaron, you know, full disclosure, worked with him at the Taxpayers Federation years ago. what you see is what you get with Aaron. Like, you never sit there going, boy, I wonder what Aaron Gunn is thinking. He'll tell you. So that may be refreshing, especially in ridings where people feel like they've been making compromises for very little return. And
it sounds like he might be the only candidate who will give an interview to Press Progress, from what you're saying. Another interesting candidate, Renee Merrifield. What is your elevator pitch for Renee Merrifield? Renee and not Katie Merrifield. Oh, we've lost your audio.
Oh, have we?
That's better.
Okay. Oh, man, I got to get a new mic. Apologies, world, for robbing you of the brilliance that is Jordan Bateman on a Tuesday afternoon. For Renee, it's pretty simple. It's, look, what we've been doing it's a little bit like Aaron Gunn and Gavin do, for that matter. What we've been doing hasn't been working. We're disconnected from voters. Specifically, we're disconnected from female voters. We lost them by 25 points in the last election. We've got to get closer. We need someone who understands the needs of working moms, of working women, of, literally more than half the electorate. Like, we've got to do a better job of connecting with them. I can put things into terms that a man simply can't. And then going from there, and I've got great ideas. I was a business owner. I built a business. I know what it's like. I know what folks are looking for from government and what they're not looking for from government. I can help restore the economy. I'm a fresh face, a fresh presentation to the public. They don't have any preconceived notions about me. It's think of me as Christy Clark without the years of history. Like, I can do this in a way that no one else can. And for Renee, I've been watching her in question period. I've been impressed. Like, she asks good questions. She's holding Adrian Dix to account, which is, if there's one minister that they all shy away from wanting to really deal with, it's Dix, and maybe honorable mention to Eby. She's fearless in her opposition to certain policies, and she's asking very good questions. So I think there's a lot of upside there for Renee as well.
And if you're her team, how do you do that? How do you make that happen?
I think you got to highlight the business connections. Like, I know what it's like to employ people. I think you continue to go head to head in a respectful way with Adrian Dix. And then for her, I think it's just getting her out in front of people. I've yet to meet anyone who's met Renee or been on a Zoom call with her, spent any time with her, who isn't suitably impressed. Even if they're not, even if they're supporting other candidates. They're like, yeah, no, she's got something. There's something there. And the more you can put her out there with people, the better. So, as many town halls, as many Zooms, as many, meetups as possible, given COVID rules. That would be my advice for Renee. Like, there's some candidates you hide from the public, or you try to keep them very tightly contained. Not Renee. You want to unleash her on the public, unleash her on members, and get her in front of as many as possible.
Yeah, the thing I would add to that, and I think you're right, this would apply to Renee Merrifield, to Gavin Dew, who we'll talk about in a second, and Val Litwin, is there'll be some who say, well, there's no experience. Well, in the last leadership campaign, the two candidates that, not to bring this up again, that signed up the most new members were by far, and it wasn't close, Diane Watts and Michael Lee. And so at the very least, it showed there's an, I don't want to say an appetite for change, but a willingness to consider change and new faces on top. And so whether or not that turns out to be the right call, I don't know, but it's not as though the party membership is completely unwilling to even consider that. And with that in mind, let's go with our sometime Orca contributor and FML follower, Gavin Dew.
Yeah, so with Gavin, it's very simple. It's, look, I've been a voice in the wilderness in the BC Liberal Party for years now, saying we've got to do a better job of reaching out to millennials and to urban voters. Clearly, we failed on both counts. No one was listening to me. They wouldn't even give me a seat to run in. Like, come on. I've been the one building millennial networks. Look at my team. They're all under the age of 40. They're passionate. These are no longer the future of British Columbia. They're the present of British Columbia. It's time for millennials to stand up and be recognized for that and be given the chance to lead. And I am that person who has spent more time with the millennials in our party than anyone else, and I can help bridge that gap. I can recruit young, fresh candidates. I can break through into urban and suburban BC in a way that these old fogies, they don't have a prayer of doing.
And if you're Gavin's team, how do you make that happen?
By reaching out through that network. Like, that's not bluster. Gavin does have a good network of those millennials, right? And getting them to connect with 10 others, and then connect, like, it's old-fashioned politics where it's, it's Mrs. Kennedy and a million cups of tea. It's, doing those very basic things, building networks in in every riding in the province of the young folks there, and getting them to introduce you to 5 or 6 others, and then making the pitch. Gavin in person, very smart guy, well-read. None of this stuff is. He's not shooting from the lip, Gavin do. He has thought about it. He has been methodical in how he's been building FML. And he's been very clear for years how the party needs to evolve in order to reach millennial and urban voters. It's just unfortunate no one was really listening.
And I mean, you could take this comparison too far, and I don't want to compare them as candidates, but it's similar to Aaron Gunn in that they have a pre-existing network that they've built, and it's a question of seeing if it translates into paid memberships that will vote for them.
Well, exactly. And, maybe Gavin has a little advantage in that his are generally more politically inclined, involved in the party already. Mm-hmm. But then again,
that's true.
Gunner will have, Gunner, is that a proper nickname to say? Gunn he used to play hockey. That was his nickname, Gunner. Used to play with the Barrie boys, with Tyson Barrie and with the Neils and all that. But Gunn will have more of the kind of broad. His network is broader, but maybe shallower is probably the best way to put it.
Fair enough. And the last of the 7, and only last because he was the newest added to our list, and we talked a little bit about off the top, Val Litwin.
So Val, it's very simple. Look, no one has a better pulse on or a better read on the pulse of small business than I do. I was head of the BC Chamber of Commerce. I instituted a survey system that allowed me to talk to thousands of small businesses across the province every single month. And they're reeling. They need help. And the NDP government has failed them. And by extension, we failed them by not winning the last election. So we need someone who knows the concerns of small business owners, the entrepreneurs, the engine of our economy. And I'm the one who can help rebuild that faith with small business owners, with small C fiscal conservatives, one step at a time. This isn't easy, but we definitely need fresh ideas, fresh vision when it comes to supporting the emerging economy in British Columbia.
And if you are Val's team, without naming any names, what would you do?
Well, I would go and first of all reach out to those networks of chamber presidents and be like, hey, get a read on the pulse. But I would do events. I would do events in front of empty storefronts. I would do little Zoom videos in front, here's such and such, this is going on. Here's what used to be the beloved restaurant in Victoria. I can't believe it's shut down. Well, I can't believe it actually. It's the NDP. We blame COVID, but the NDP didn't offer any help to these folks. Tourism, all these different kind of find businesses and highlight them one by one. And he should not be pictured or videoed in front of anything other than an empty storefront. And make that pitch. Whatever we're doing isn't working. And we're going to emerge from our COVID bubbles and realize that our communities have been hollowed out because many of the businesses, the arts and culture, the tourism, the services that we've relied on are gone. I'm the person who can help protect what we have still around and then grow the economy back into these other storefronts and opportunities.
It remains to be seen. I think, this was going to be a shorter episode this week, and in the interest of full disclosure, I have an electrician coming in about 5 minutes. But I mean, this is why we tune in every week, is get the updates, especially on the leadership race. This is fascinating.
Yes, and as always, if you're working on a campaign, you want to slip me some info. If you've talked to some folks, feel free. Jordan at icba.ca, always looking for conversation, intel, and see what's happening out there on the ground.
And in that spirit, until next week, he's Jordan Bateman. I'm McLean Kay. Happy politics.